there was this Washington Post article from a few days ago. Zach, you just show my screen very briefly so people can see what we're talking about. Biden selects transgender doctor Rachel Levine as assistant health secretary. I'm going to read just the second paragraph before you give me my screen back. Dr. Rachel Levine, this is Biden's words in a statement. Dr. Rachel Levine will bring the steady leadership and essential expertise we need to get people through this pandemic, no matter their zip code, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability, and meet the public health needs of our country in this critical moment and beyond, Biden said in a statement. Quote, she is a historic and deeply qualified choice to help lead our administration's health efforts. End quote. Farther down in the article, we have her saying, she is not saying what she is intending to do, but she's talking about her work in Pennsylvania. She says, I am proud of the work we have done as an administration to address health equity and the work I have done personally to raise awareness about LGBTQ equity issues, she said. To which, I ask, which is it? You can't have it both ways. Here we have these two things right next to each other in an article, in a single article from Washington Post. Is this person going to serve all Americans, regardless of demographic marker, or are they going to be working for equity, which explicitly centers these demographic markers and seeks redress for differences in outcomes? Which is it? Regardless of demographic marker, as Biden says, or focusing on demographic markers, as she implies? You can't have it both ways. Regardless or focused. Regardless or focused. I really hope it's regardless. Those are his words. Those are Biden's words. There is nothing in what I have found of what she has said in the past, Levine, the new assistant health secretary, to suggest that there is going to be any regardless here.
Well, also there is the fact of her nomination to the post, which I will say would be striking under ordinary circumstances and appears to be very questionable in the midst of a pandemic that is bringing us to our economic knees, among other things. That this, it is obviously possible that she is the very best person for that post at this moment and just happens to be trans. I don't see any evidence to that effect. No. So one has to imagine that even in the midst of this pandemic, the choice was made to signal something about gender identity rather than figure out whoever the top person for this post would have been on the merits. And that is a very disturbing sign. And
I'm going to go full turf here, okay? And then you're going to riff a little bit on what that means. WAPO, in an article from 4 years ago, this is 2016, at the point that she was appointed in Pennsylvania, show this just briefly, Zach. Meet Rachel Levine, one of the very few transgender public officials in America. And this is from June 1st, 2016. This is while Obama was still president. In this article, we have Levine being revealed as having some traditional markers of femininity. Apparently, quote, she favors chunky necklaces and Earl Grey tea and is in constant motion. But later in the same article, Levine does not discuss whether she took hormones or had surgery, calling it a private medical matter. You can't actually change your sex if you're a mammal. It's never happened. You can change the presentation, the way that you appear. That is gender. In order to be welcome in some female spaces, there is no way that self-ID should be sufficient. And claiming that the actual hormonal and surgical changes, which do not get you all the way to changing sex, but get you into a position of actually, in my mind, being transgendered, if that's private, and all you have to do is wear chunky necklaces and drink Earl Grey tea to be considered female, and then now we've got this female person as assistant health secretary, well, that's, chalk one up to feminism? No, this is backwards land in so many ways, and this is yet another one of these places where people who aren't thinking too hard about it sort of see this, go, what? Okay, I guess. Oh, no one knows if this person is even on hormones of the sex they weren't born to or has had any surgery. Maybe they're just drinking tea and wearing necklaces, and that's enough to get them called a woman? Didn't know it was so easy.
Yeah, it's an amazing feat. So you described yourself as having gone full TERF.
Yeah.
TERF, for those of you who have been living under a rock, it means it's an acronym: Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And my contention is that we can prove that that's not actually a thing.
Awesome.
And here's how we can do it. One says certain things in the public sphere, and this accusation comes back. You and I have both had it hurled at us many, many times, and we know many other people who have as well. What one needs to do in order to have that term hurled at you is espouse a belief that simply saying that you are of one gender or the other is not sufficient, and that some people will, if you say that it is sufficient, if that's the standard you legally adopt, that there are those who will game the system and already are. And if you say those things, you will be labeled as a trans exclusionary radical feminist, which is an accusation akin in some circles to being called, for example, a racist, right? It's clearly understood to be a kind of bigotry. But here's the problem, is if those are the only things that you need to believe in order to be in this category, then you don't need to be trans exclusionary. Right? You don't need to be radical, and you don't need to be a feminist. As a matter of fact, if you just simply believed what pretty much everybody believed 10, 15 years ago, you'd be right there in TERF land.
Plenty of conservatives, this was your point to me earlier, plenty of conservatives have this same sense of like, when did we stop not understanding biology? And many conservative people would not call themselves radical feminists.
Right. It's a simply traditional view of gender roles, which isn't where you and I come from. But
well, they may have a traditional role,
right,
view of gender roles. This just requires actually nothing about gender roles. It requires understanding biology.
Well, right. You could come there from biology. You could come there from, just simply having a belief in traditional roles that are, you and I would say, are antiquated. But any of those things are good enough to get you through the door. So the point is, none of the letters in the acronym are required to be in the category. It's a special category. It's like equity. It's a magic term. And in this case, what that magic term is doing is it is standing like a buzzsaw on the side of an argument space. And the idea is you are limited to certain arguments, but if you make any of these other arguments, then we're going to shove you into that thing. We're going to shove you into the bigot saw. And at some level, we have no choice but to stare this down. TERF isn't a thing. Just because a group of people have decided to equate it with bigotry and then accuse people of it as they find convenient doesn't make it true. It doesn't create any validity. And what's more, we can tell it's invalid because even by its own definition, it doesn't add up because there's so many people in the category who are none of those things.
Yeah. Well, I do feel like there's a way in which we're living in an age of legitimized epithets against women. TERF, Karen, right? Like, these are epithets, pure and simple. But of course, those are the two that come to mind, and there's plenty that are hurled at people regardless of their sex. The fact that you can be a Nazi for saying that equality of outcome is not a legitimate goal is rather remarkable, and it acts as that same kind of buzzsaw.
Yeah, I agree. It's a general form of argument, and there are variations on the theme. I would say Ibram X. Kendi's formulation about there is nothing, everything is either racist or anti-racist, and therefore if you can't say that something is anti-racist, well, we know what category it's in. I mean, that's a very special form of logical argument. By the way, Dr. Kendi, if you are watching, and I hope you are, we can also prove very simply, in a way that every single person who hears it will understand why it is the correct logical formulation. We can prove that your contention that there is no non-racist, that there is only racist and anti-racist, we can prove that that is incorrect. And I would like to offer you, if you'd like to come on the Dark Horse podcast, I'd love to have you on. You can outline your position. I will outline my challenge to it, and we can see which argument wins out.